So thanks for joining us. We are here to present the Media Movement, work about MTV Staying Alive Foundation. I am Kim Longfield. I have been working with this team, this great team, Jess Gergen and Yvonne Diogo and others for the last year and a half to create a set of dynamic dashboards to enable decision-making at MTV Staying Alive Foundation. I'm the head of DataBoom. I'm the founder and principal at DataBoom. We are a research and communications agency. We believe that powerful insights can change the world. We work with implementers and foundations to align strategy and measurement, and also to tell better stories backed by evidence. I'd like to introduce my colleagues, Jess Gergen and Yvonne Diogo. Jess, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. I'm Jess Gergen. I am the CEO of Visualist, which is headquartered in Mozambique, and that's where I currently live. We're a public interest data design firm, which means that we work across all social sectors. Everything we do has to do with data, and we leverage design to make compelling visualizations.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tsireletso Yvonne Diogo, and I represent the MTV Staying Alive Foundation, which is a registered charity in both the United Kingdom, United States, and right here in South Africa. We specialize in behavior change campaigns created for various governments. And I sit in Johannesburg looking after all things MTV Sugar as the designated country manager. Over to you, Kim.
Great, thanks. Jess, why don't we go ahead and put up the slides, and I'll give some background from yesterday while you're doing that. So yesterday we were able to do a poll with our presentation, and we asked just a couple of questions. The first was, does your organization currently have automated dashboards? And 83% of the participants said yes. And then we asked, what data does your organization currently monitor? And the options were campaign reach, like television, radio, social media engagement, participation in in-person events like outreach and peer education, polling results, financial data, and other operational data. And the winners were campaign reach, financial data, and other operational data. So you're in the right place if you're interested in these issues, because we're going to touch on most of them. And then, let's see, we've organized this presentation to follow the order of design, build, use, and learning. And I'll go first, and we'll talk about the problems we were trying to solve. Jess will talk about how they built the system, she and her colleagues at Visualist. And then most importantly, Yvonne's going to talk about the use and learning at Staying Alive and for MTV Sugar down south. Great, let's go to the next slide. So MTV Staying Alive Foundation is a media movement that uses storytelling to save lives. Since 2005, the organization has created groundbreaking content to improve young people's health. One of the things I really love about this organization is they're very problem-oriented. A lot of organizations make beautiful content, but they're not really clear on the problems that they're trying to solve. And so from the conception of the series and what we're going to talk about today, a lot of it is the Down South and the soap operatic series, but all the other campaign elements too have a lot of thought in them. And the teams, the creative teams, are very focused on the challenges that they are trying to solve for the audience and the stories, the characters in the stories. Topic areas include sexually transmitted infections, HIV, pregnancy prevention, family planning, gender-based violence, and this year, a series on staying healthy during the time of COVID called Alone Together. Next slide. So the challenge. MTV Staying Alive has always believed in using evidence to inform its content and evaluate progress, but the evidence wasn't always centralized, and data were owned by different staff, housed in different places, organized and inconsistently digitized, and they weren't always comparable. There was no way to seamlessly bring data together for decision making. So in 2020, we changed that. We had seed funding from the Packard Foundation to start a set of digitized dashboards. And now Jess is going to take us through the build. Oh, excuse me, she's not. This is the framework. Excuse me. This is the upfront thinking. I had a session earlier in the conference about upfront thinking and really thinking about how your organization wants to use data before you start on the design and the build. And this is the framework we worked from. And this is the way MTV Staying Alive Foundation really approaches their work. For their formative research, they really want to understand what they should do for the audience and what problems they're trying to solve. They also want to understand their effectiveness and their impact. They want to understand how well, how are they doing with the campaign? How well is it doing? Adaptive learning, they want to understand how to improve the campaign. And for strategy and growth, they want to understand shifting trends among the audience and where to go. This is an organization that knows young audiences very well, and you have to be very flexible and dynamic because they do change and they are a bit fickle. And I think this organization does that quite well. Great, next slide. And now it's over to Jess for the build. Thanks.
Thanks, Kim. So I'll briefly go through some of the details of how we brought all the data together, how we built the use cases or the personas so that we understood who's going to use the dashboard views. But if there's any further questions, we have included our emails on the last slide and happy to answer any further technical questions. So where did we start? The first step was getting a handle on where all the data was coming from. And so this schematic summarizes our big categories of data that we were taking from each of the sugar campaigns. And so Yvonne's going to talk a lot about Down South, which is a South African campaign, but each campaign had their own broadcasting data, for instance, that looked slightly different. Some have polling data, some don't. And then some of the campaigns had some peer education data and or tracking of the peer education program. And the social media data actually was the most sophisticated data source that we used, and it was all housed on TalkWalker, which is an analytics platform that specializes in social media. And so that one was quite far along and everything was in the same place. Yeah. The other thing we had to consider almost from the beginning was designing for multiple users. So this dashboard wasn't just for one team or just for headquarters to assess, what's happening across campaigns, but rather kind of for a lot of different people. So at the headquarter level or across the MTV Sugar brand, there was senior leadership who wanted to understand what was happening when you compare campaigns or what happens across seasons. So comparing season 1 to season 2, you have independent evaluators who might triangulate their data with the monitoring data that's embedded into some of the dashboards. And then of course you have fundraisers or proposals where you're putting some key achievements and also demonstrating the M&E capture already available with the MTV Sugar campaigns. And then on the campaign level, we had teams that consisted of country managers similar to Yvonne. So she's tracking a lot of things simultaneously and very interested to keep tabs on all of the things happening within the campaigns and between seasons. We've got social media users who are quite familiar working with dashboards. They have access to real-time data in the TalkWalker. This is more of a tool for them to go see what else is coming out of other data sources. And then writing and production typically uses some of our analyses on themes and comments and how the sugar content, whether it be on social media or on other platforms, is engaging audience members. And then lastly, the peer education coordinator. So things about performance and how many sessions a peer educator might be conducting, etc. This is just an example of some of the data mapping we did. We made a couple of these diagrams and you don't need to read the details, but essentially what we use these tools just to understand where all the data sources were coming from. And in the pilot dashboard, which was the first iteration that we did, I think we published that in June 2020. And then in February 2021, we kind of finalized the second iteration of the dashboard, which you'll see in the live demo today. The big thing that we had to really work out as far as from a technical perspective was aligning all the timing which is that last column on the right. A lot of the data sources had different timing. So for instance, broadcast data, it comes in on a weekly basis because that's when the episodes are screened, but it's only for maybe 9 or 10 weeks or however many weeks it takes for the full episodes to be, or the full season to be broadcast. Whereas social media data, we could have had it by the hour, by the day, or by the week. And so the timing was something that we had to work on aligning. This is just a quick schematic explaining for phase 1. We actually kept most of the data in their native forms, which was Excel, and we did any data cleaning or transformations so that the data was set or prepped to go into Tableau in the right or correct formats. That was kind of a little bit more of a manual process we did in Excel. And for phase 2, we migrated it over to the Tableau server. So that's one big accomplishment in a sense that it is now housed on a server and we can link it and automate some of the data source updates. We also use Tableau Prep for all the data cleaning. And so these, what they call flow, the Tableau flow preps, these are the flows that we set up. So whenever a data source is updated, the Tableau server usually can do this on its own, but an administrator can also go in and hit the button to run it. And then it cleans and organizes the data exactly how you want it. And there's no manual processes involved in prepping the data. I'll hand it over to Yvonne.
Thanks so much, Jess. I think before we go into speaking about MTV Sugar Down South, which is the campaign that is implemented in South Africa, we should just, share the true scope and scale of the data that exists within MTV Staying Alive Foundation for these campaigns. So we've got this multi-award-winning television drama series, which is basically reaches more than 72 countries globally. It also reaches more than 720 million households. And all of this is achieved through the network of more than 180 broadcasters. So we're talking about a lot of data that's coming through these various channels. What's also important is the purpose of the campaign. The fact that we are taking an entertainment medium such as a television drama series, and we are then fusing that with health messaging that is briefed in by the various governments where the campaign is initiated for the respective countries, as well as the funding partners. It's important for us to be able to track and see how the campaign is performing in terms of delivering on those national objectives. What's also important is the different layers as far as the media mix is concerned. Yes, we've got the television drama series at the heart of the campaign, but there's several other media mix components. We've got the radio drama, we've got outreach in the form of peer education, we've got graphic novels, and so forth. And so with all of these different components, including the social media in the form of Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, we've got different stakeholders within SAF that are responsible for these deliverables for the campaign. We then have external stakeholders looking after the outreach component, which is the peer education program. So those who implement the peer education program are groups of volunteers, and they are situated within local communities. They are trained on how to take video content from the television drama together with the prescribed manual and then deliver education sessions around the health messaging. And so with all of these players, it's critical that we have a good data management system that allows us to draw insights from the data. What I'd like to share is what is critical of the MTV Sugar campaign. That is a multi-award-winning behavior change campaign. It has to deliver on two fronts. The first being awareness and interest for the health services as prescribed by the respective government. And then secondly, the campaign must then link the interested audience to the health products and services. And so it's important for us to have a good monitoring and evaluation strategy. Jess, why don't you take us to the next slide? We will now go into the dashboards and have a look at the campaign that is rolled out in South Africa specifically, MTV Sugar Down South, and have a look at the dashboard that we've got now, which is a single view of broadcast data, social media, as well as peer education. Now, what's really fantastic about this specific view is that we can have a look at MTV Sugar Down South, the campaign that's rolled out in South Africa, and look at its performance relative to other campaigns, for example, in Nigeria, Ivory Coast, India, and so forth. We are not only able to look at the comparative views as far as broadcast data is concerned, but we can then look at the social media, look at the polling, as well as the peer education, you know, in terms of how the content is being used at ground level. On this particular slide, it's a zoom. Thanks, Jess. Thank you so much for that. I think maybe let's just hold it there for a second. Okay, we'll keep it to this one, Jess. I'll go into polling and then move into our audience. So as far as the polling is concerned, this is quite a key view for us in that we are able to see the response from the audience in terms of the television drama series. So basically we've got polling questions that are posed to the audience, and the questions are embedded in that television drama, but we are able to dissect and see responses by question, and basically also see in terms of percentage how the market is responding to the content. I'd like to just move on to the far right there. So that specific view that we have there is quite interesting in that we do not have an MTV Sugar campaign in the US. But if we look at our key, we can see that our second or our first biggest audience out of the respective country actually sits within the US. So this is quite helpful in that it shows us where the audience for the respective campaign actually sits. And that helps us in terms of strategy and growth to possibly develop campaigns for other markets. Thank you very much, Jess. We can move on to the next slide. Thank you so much. On this specific one, this is such a pleasure for us to basically have all the data from the field, you know, delivered to us in a single view. This is based on the questionnaires that are completed by the beneficiaries of the campaign. So the participants of the peer education program, we are able to basically see, you know, demographic profiles of who's participating in the sessions. We can do so by gender, basically see who's participating by gender, age distribution, language. And this is quite important for us because it informs us as to the needs at ground level, whether there's a possible need for us maybe to adapt the program in, you know, in a broader range of languages other than English, perhaps Zulu or the main vernacular languages that are spoken. If we cast our eyes to the right-hand side, my right-hand side, we can also then further dissect the data and see performance by project of the peer education program. We are able to also see then the episodes of the television drama that are being screened at the various sessions that are being held within communities. But also, if you look at the bar graph right at the bottom, we are then also able to see by topic, you know, the responses from the various participants in terms of attendance, and then also their responses to the various questionnaires that they complete. Jess, if you can take us to the next slide, please. Yes, so this is a more close view of the data. So we basically have a pre-exposure questionnaire that participants complete before partaking in the MTV Sugar Peer Education Program. After completing the program, they then complete a post-exposure questionnaire, of which the data also sits on the single view. So if you cast your eyes at the top, we've got 4 keys, in fact 5 keys, and these keys basically are groupings of the questions in relation to the national objectives of the various health ministry or education ministries. So the first one that we are looking at, GBV, if I'm seeing that correctly, Jess. So we've got HIV testing on the far right, and then we've got HIV in the middle, and then we've got several others. So the questions are grouped accordingly, and we are then able to see what the participants' responses were in terms of assessing their risk, and risk profiling towards the likes of, sexual violence or HIV before going through the peer education program, as well as what their perception is or what their sentiment is after being educated accordingly. And we are able to see all of that in terms of the actual number of participants, their actual responses, and then also the percentage of participants by indicator. So very, very useful in terms of shaping the program and designing the curricula to make sure that we are addressing any gaps in terms of knowledge, or if we are not shifting sentiment, then we know how to adjust the education program accordingly. Thanks so much for the slide, Jess. We can move on to the next one.
Actually, Yvonne, I think we've got about 10 minutes to take people through a live demo, if that's okay. I think, Jess, you have it ready, right? And maybe we can go through the global view first and then down into the down south pages.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Kim. So this is the comparative view of down south in relation to the other MTV Sugar campaigns. And Jess, if you hover at the top there, we can see the audience reached is over 30 million for down south specifically. Those are the television views. If we cast our eyes to the social media content, what's really interesting there is not just being able to see the reach, but being able to see the engagement by theme or health message. And that is nicely listed there for us in terms of highest message of engagement. And then if we cast our eyes to the bottom, again, social media, that breakdown across the different social media platforms and how down south compares in relative to other MTV Sugars, with percentage figures as well as actuals. That's really, really useful because we can then see which channel is working for the campaign, where the audience is most engaged and receptive, and that informs our content plans for social media. And then just lastly, at the bottom, we can then see the peer education in terms of the total number of participants sitting through the education sessions. But that linkage to services is also quite critical because we can see the total number of participants and the average number of participants per session, but we can actually also see the product that is being consumed. the number of condoms distributed, which is very, very important in terms of reporting. Thank you so much for that, Jess. Yes, I think if we look at the polling, Jess, we can stay on the polling. This is really, really phenomenal because this is now the audience at home or on social media, and they are watching the content. And this is all data that comes from them in terms of how much they've learned from the show or the television drama series, and also what their sentiment is in terms of the messaging that is carried out. So we are able to dive deep into the data using this filter, by question, and basically see, not only the number of responses, but also see the percentage in terms of that particular question, which is really, really helpful. Thank you so much, Jess. We can move on to the next slide. So the peer education, Jess mentioned this at the onset. Before embarking on this project and having these beautiful, dashboard displays, we used to track everything. It was a paper-based tracking model that we were following internally. And in terms of, tracking field activity, we would have peer educators communicating with staff via WhatsApp group. So it was really, really tedious for us to basically collate all of that and be able to then put it all in one report. But now we have it all together in one single view. You can stay there, Jess. We can see the peer educators and their activity on this particular view. But not only that, we can see in terms of the number of sessions being conducted, how many each peer educator is basically overseeing, the number of participants that they are seeing, as well as the content that is being screened during those sessions. And we can also see in terms of the actual sessions, because every session is designed to basically deliver on a certain health messaging theme. And so this then speaks back to those national objectives for the campaign. Jess, thank you very much. I'm just going to move across. Yes, perfect. This is fine, Jess. We can stay here, and then we can also track weekly performance. On the bottom left graph, we can track weekly performance, and we are able to do so by project. And then when we hover on any of the axis, then we can also get the actual stats and see exactly which project that's from, the week of that particular session, in line with the project timeline, and see the number of participants. So really, really helpful. We can go into the final view. Jess, thank you. Thank you so much. So this is really, really useful if we look at our participant data. We really get to know and understand who is actually attending and benefiting from the education program. Not only in terms of demographic profile, gender, age, and language, but if you cast your eyes to the map right at the bottom, we can see the geographic coverage of the program within South Africa. And again, Jess is hovering over the different sections on the map. We can see exactly where the beneficiaries and the participants are. And so, from a planning perspective and strategy and growth, we know where to then move the program to if we identify any gaps and where there's a need in certain communities. Jess, if you can move to the far right over the episodes. Yes, thank you so much. again, there, if you hover over the episodes, we get the gist of the actual education session in terms of the themes that it touches on. If you can see that first one at the top, session 1, it covers building social media, emotional and sexual intelligence. You know, so if we scroll down all the different episodes relative to each project, we can see exactly which part of the curricula has been carried out or delivered for that you know, respective audience. And then the last bar graph at the bottom, Jess. Here are the key health themes on the far right-hand side. And again, we can track here and see, you know, who is actually attending. And also in terms of total attendance, how do we track relative to each national objective? So really, really helpful in terms of not only adaptive learning, but also strategy and growth. Thank you so much, Jess. I think we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. And then just on this particular view, how the dashboards have really assisted us in terms of effectiveness and impact. We've mentioned some of this before, in that they help us see the reach and the engagement across the different media channels. And so we are able to dial up or dial down depending on where the gaps are, to make sure that we fully reach our audience and we do so effectively. We are also then able to align both the multimedia content that has been created, such as the television drama series, and make sure that we link that to the beneficiaries at ground level. And so we can see which content is being used, and any episodes which are not you know, landing with the audience, we are then able to revise accordingly and make sure that we tailor the content to be most conducive to the participants. As far as adaptive learning is concerned, the dashboards have helped us to basically inform the design of the next campaign. So we can clearly see the successes of past and current campaigns and take those learnings into future campaigns. This also helps us immensely in terms of setting KPIs. Yes, national government will have their set objectives for health or for education, but based on past performance of various campaigns, we can then advise government in terms of which KPIs are yet you know, to be enhanced and carried into future campaigns. As far as strategy and growth is concerned, it's very, very important for us to be able to you know, based on a single view, have a look at you know, targets that have been achieved by past and current projects, and then incorporate those into fundraising proposals. And where there's a need in terms of any gaps as far as health messaging is concerned, we are then able to go to respective donors and fundraise accordingly in order to be able to address those health gaps. And then we saw in the example of the United States, we do not have an MTV Sugar campaign in the States so far, but we certainly have a captive audience there. So there's an opportunity for a future MTV Sugar campaign for that market. Thank you so much, Kim and Jess. Over to you.
Thanks, Yvonne. That was perfect. We're on time. I guess this is next steps in terms of the build, and this relates to one of the questions one of the audience members asked. Next steps are to integrate more audience demographic data to better show who's watching. So Jess talked about TalkWalker earlier, but we're limited in the breakdowns, the demographic breakdowns that we can provide. And so we are trying to get access to Viacom's data so that we have better intel for Yvonne to be able to break the audience down. This is important, especially when we start to talk about who's being reached in equity. We want to incorporate viewing data on the duration and episodes to get a sense of how long the content was that the audience watched. Because the people tend to start, especially on the social media channels, they tend to start an episode but stop. And we would like to know how long and how much information are they actually getting. Ideally, we'd like to know if they came back and restarted it, but we're still working on that. We want to integrate evaluation results into the dashboards. This gets at that effectiveness and understanding then, you know, MTV Staying Alive has third-party evaluators, usually universities who are doing household surveys, but keeping that data available in the dashboard so that as they're monitoring the very timely monthly data that they get from these other channels, you know, how is the campaign doing, so they don't need to wait until the evaluation to find out how they did. They have a much better sense over time of the performance and the change at the audience level. Incorporate more recent polling data and better leverage results to fill in gaps between evaluations. Same thing. So while the polling data isn't a generalizable sample of all youth, it is a very large sample of viewers, and they often have thousands of people responding to these polls. And so that seems like an ideal opportunity to bake in questions that are similar to the ones the evaluators are asking on those household surveys to get a sense of where the audience is landing. And then integrate digital peer education data into the dashboards as well, because during COVID, the team had to shift to more digital formats for audience engagement because they couldn't do in person. And so there's learning there too, especially as Yvonne said, as they understand how to better reach the audience and how they like to consume the information and how they would adjust additional campaigns. And so I wanted to get into the questions with the time that we've got left. Jess, I think this is one for you, the back end. So, you know, obviously there's this beautiful format and engagement that Yvonne and her team gets to see with the back end. Can you talk about the original state of the data and how you brought it together? You had that great visual, but, you know, what did the data look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in the beginning, like I said, it was over 20 Excel spreadsheets and even data that was similar, like broadcasting data. So we bucketed all that together. They were formatted differently because some of the broadcasters reported in different formats. Their data was structured differently, maybe had different variables. So we had to kind of standardize that. We did a lot of unions and joins. The data visualization softwares now are pretty good at kind of managing multiple data sources as long as you can kind of find a common thread. And I think I mentioned in the slide, our real common thread was actually the timing. So we built a skeleton of the timing and then aligned all the data sources according to that timing, essentially joining them where they came into the campaign along the timeline between 2019 and as recent as March 2021.
Thanks, Jess. Yvonne, this is one of my favorite experiences from this project. How did you use to get the peer education data? Because you talked about it, it's a volunteer model. You need to be able to manage these different peer educators, see their performance, where they're actually engaged and what they're showing. But how are you getting reports from peers before this, from the educators?
Kim, it was manic. It was really, you know, quite challenging to manage in that we had multiple WhatsApp groups. And so on a WhatsApp group, you're sitting with at least 30 peer educators, and that's how everybody's inputting their activity. And to try and now go through all the different chats and put that all together, it was, yeah.
And sometimes they were taking photos, right? And loading photos?
Correct. So they would physically upload the questionnaires because they were paper-based, but then also after completing a session, take a photo of the group and then input and text the number of participants, the episodes watched, you know, and the themes covered. It was via text.
Okay, thanks. All right, Yvonne, another question for you. Who uses the data?
So this is really helpful in that, you know, we have different team players within SAF, right? We've got the social media team, the fundraising team, the management team, and all of us rely on exactly the same information in order to get our day-to-day jobs done. So across, you know, the org structure, everybody's able to actually use the dashboards and use this data for report writing, for formulating campaigns and campaign plans, and then obviously to basically marry that to the evaluations, for overall reporting of the campaigns.
And then a related question to that is, how much capacity building did you have to do for users to be able to engage with the data? Maybe Jess, you can take that question. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, let's have Jess do it. And then maybe Yvonne, any of the challenges in doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, well, we were very conscious of the users when designing the dashboard. And I think the second iteration really hit the nail on the head. The first iteration was, of course, a learning experience. And what we had done to engage some of the team members was to set up a training, which was a little bit didactic to begin with, but we challenged them with a scavenger hunt. And kind of over time, Yvonne and other country managers and users have asked us questions and kind of engaged with the dashboards for reporting and different things. And of course, we have a user guide. So we've tried a couple different strategies to make sure people have the resources they need to kind of approach something that maybe feels a little unfamiliar.
Yvonne, what were the biggest challenges, do you think, in terms of capacity building on your team?
Yeah, you know what, I think, Jess and the rest of the team really, they made it so seamless for us. So I don't really remember, going through any major hurdles. Kim, they really, took us by the hand, and, we shared whatever data we had in the format that we had it, and they did the rest. And then I just remember, through our one-on-one engagements, we really just had virtual training sessions where they've taken us through the build, and functionalities, and so forth. So it really hasn't been that much of a challenging process for us. I think maybe for Jess and the team, yes.
Great, thanks. There were some skeptics in the audience. They're like, these are such beautiful dashboards. Are you sure they're just phase 2? Are you sure they're really the second iteration? I mean, Jess, can you talk about the first iteration and then maybe what changed between the 2 phases?
Yeah, it was an interesting question. Truly, it is our second time, but I think we've thought a lot about how to tailor these dashboards. I think starting with those questions that Kim went through about thinking about what decisions need to be made and who is looking at each of these views and for what purpose. The first iteration, I think we really tried to have that homepage match across the campaign so that you're looking at one view and then it feels more familiar even when you drill down into one campaign. So then you kind of know where to find the data. Where in the phase 2, we really excelled, I think, was these extra views, which both Down South and Naija, which is the Nigeria campaign, have for their peer education programs. So what we did was we worked with the country teams and we asked them if they had extra data or additional sources of data since we had built the first one. And then we gave them a wireframe. So we built a kind of static version of what the dashboard would look like with kind of as real time we could do for the graphics so that they really got a sense of what is it going to look like. And they didn't have any interaction, but they could still kind of go through and give us a lot of feedback. And they were really engaged in that process, and it made it so much better because now I think the dashboards are incredibly tailored to what they need to use them for. So that was phase 2.
Yeah, I don't think anybody could argue that you don't have engaged users with somebody like Yvonne. Great, I think that's all the time we have. In the chat, we put a link where the session slides are available. Also a link for more information about the Staying Alive Foundation, and then also specifically about the Sugar campaign and the Down South series. There's a link in there about that too, so you can learn more about this great content and these great campaigns. Jess, any final words? No? Yvonne, you want to, any final words?
Yeah, no, we are so glad to have this tool, and really look forward to using it in in planning, managing and reporting all of our campaigns. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure working with you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.